As the chairman of the SEC during Black Monday, what did you experience?
In 1987, we had some poor economic news and some market disruption in the week before, but there was really not extensive warning about the crash. And on October 19th, 1987, the market dropped 23%. It was 503 points. We had a very strong decrease in liquidity. In 87, we then had specialists and the concentrated trading on the New York Stock Exchange. On that day, the specialists did their duty to provide continuity to the market, and they stepped up, but then they ran out of capital. And so their liquidity disappeared. The market went down 23% on Monday, but on Tuesday, the 20th, I was standing in my office and the phone rang, and it was the chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, and he said, "We have no liquidity here, and we are going to close the market." And I was just stunned that the markets were basically going to close on an ad hoc basis. And I asked my staff whether, he said, "Will you support us?" And I asked my staff whether we should. They said yes. So I said we would support them. And then he said, "I want to call the White House and talk to the White House about this before I close them." 10 minutes later, he called back and said, while I was on the phone to the White House, trading came back into the exchange and we're not going to close. But for me, the idea that our markets, the major New York Stock Exchange market, would close with nobody knowing what's going on created the possibility of what I thought of as chaos. That is, a market in which the United States stock market is not functioning.
After the 1987 crash, you served on the President's Working Group on Financial Markets. Who else served, and what was your conclusion?
Alan Greenspan, chairman of the Fed, the Secretary of the Treasury, the chairman of the CFTC, and the chairman of the SEC. And we tried to figure out what to do. We finally came up with the idea of system-wide circuit breakers, which essentially meant that what we did was to persuade the securities exchanges and the CFTC to close their markets if the market went down certain numbers. We used numbers there, but eventually that system-wide circuit breaker rule got to the point where it was closed a certain amount of time if it went down 10%, certain amount of time it went down 20%, and closed if it went down 30%. And 30% in our 1987 market was not unthinkable. Today, 30% would just be wild. The pauses were 2-hour pauses at that time, and that was the point of circuit breakers is to allow the market to settle down and for people to get information.
What circuit breaker thresholds are currently being proposed in response to the flash crash?
10% to 7%, 20% to 13%, and 30% to 20%. Lower absolute numbers. And then the trading pauses will be much, much shorter. Now, the proposal is that the trading pauses will be 15 minutes, which in this market is a lot for people to pause. But I may say 15 minutes is an eternity for high-frequency trading, but it's not an eternity for human intervention. And what we wanted to have was a time for human intervention.
You are a member of the Joint CFTC-SEC Advisory Committee on Emerging Regulatory Issues. What has your work with the committee entailed, and what's been accomplished to date?
Our committee reached a number of conclusions, but most of them were suggestions for study. So what we did was to support the SEC and some of the things it's been doing. After the market crash in 2010, they had to break some of these trades, but the participants in the market said that they were concerned that they didn't know which trades would be broken and which would not. So the SEC has gotten the markets to agree on the criteria for breaking trades, so those would be known in advance. We agreed with that. We had an experience in which the computerized traders left the market. They were when the market became slow, when prices weren't certain, and the volatility increased, the high-frequency computers left, and there wasn't any human. There were very few humans to say, let's go back in the market. The question that we wrestled with was whether to suggest that the high-frequency traders be required to stay in the market, that they, in effect, have obligations to stay there. We didn't go that far. We raised the possibilities of requiring dark pools to execute orders during high periods of volatility instead of sending those orders out. We recommended considering changing the order routing practices and the trade-through rules, and got a lot of flack about that as interfering with the markets. But notably, we did not recommend the elimination of co-location, and we did not recommend the elimination of high-frequency trading. One of the things I was particularly concerned about, however, was the question of the disparity between market information between high-frequency traders and the retail environment. The high-frequency traders are really able to beat the retailers to the market.
What were the committee's thoughts on naked access?
We were aware of the Commission's naked access rule when we were writing, and in that naked access rule, they require brokers with market access and with customers coming into the market to give market access to have risk management controls, and those brokers should be supervised by the stock exchanges. So my nirvana is that the brokers are required to have risk management controls, that the customers are required to have risk management controls, and that the exchanges require somehow these brokers to tell them what their problems are, and then they tell the SEC what their problems are, and then maybe somebody can do something about it.